Good afternoon and welcome to Go Beyond. My name is Alyssa Robinson and I am here with our senior pastor, Reverend Daniel Humbert.
Hey.
And Go Beyond is a time that we dig deeper into the message from Sunday. And this Sunday was all about what happened after Jesus was resurrected and how rushing out to share the good news of Jesus built this community of Christ. And you made a comment at the very beginning of worship when you were welcoming us into worship that it's still Easter. And can you explain that to me a little bit as a person who, like, growing up, my understanding is there's an Easter Sunday and then we move on.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you asking that because most people don't realize it's actually a season. And we talked about this, I guess, a couple of weeks ago as well, that, in the early church, every Sunday was Easter. And so for that very reason, it's Easter, but also because it's a season and it lasts about 50 days. And then we get to what's called Pentecost. We'll talk about that later. But that's why it's still Easter. We keep
So for
celebrating.
the next 2 months, every Sunday, we can say Happy Easter.
That's right. That's exactly right. We could say it every Sunday, but we'll just say it over the next few weeks.
Yeah. So my first question today is, I kind of veered off of the Huddle Guide a little bit because Doug added some extra questions into the app this week that I thought were very intriguing. So I pulled some of those extra questions. And I want to know, how have you seen God continue the rock rolling business, and maybe define what rock rolling is?
So I loved Doug's sort of antiphon. Is God still in the rock rolling business? So, Pastor Doug preached this sermon, and a part of what he believes, as I do as well, is that God's still in this rock rolling business. So the rock was rolled away, right, from the tomb, and that way the tomb could become empty. So he maintains, as do I, that God is still in the rock rolling business. And golly, it's hard for a pastor not to be able to claim a bunch of that. So, number one, Doug's claims on Sunday were great, whether it was our participation in building water wells or in helping in Mozambique or, any of the human trafficking that we've been a part of. All of those are rock rolling kinds of things. And, excuse me. I've had the opportunity to do that in multiple churches. So human trafficking, I'll never forget the very first time that I did that. It was a huge eye-opening experience for me personally, not the least of which to understand that, golly, there's human trafficking right in our neighborhoods. In fact, there had been a human trafficking event in that time frame in a neighborhood not too far from my home. And so it was very eye-opening to realize, man, we can still help these women. We can still make a difference in their lives. God is still rolling that rock away. Another instance in one of my previous churches, the last church I served, we had a team of people who were actually still going. I just saw a post just the other day. So I've been gone from that church 7 years. They've reinstituted the ramp building group now after a year of hiatus, of course, because of COVID. But so they've been building ramps, wooden ramps for people whose homes didn't have a ramp, but they needed it for their wheelchair accessibility. They're setting these people free, literally, out of their homes to build a simple ramp that you and I might take for granted, but these folks can't get out. That's a rock rolling deal, right? And so I just think story after story. We did baptisms this past weekend where we baptized both youth who were 12, 13 years old, but we had two 17-year-old young men, and we had a 50-some-odd-year-old man who decided he wanted to get baptized with his child who was getting confirmed because he'd never been baptized before. That's a rock rolling experience as well. If Nick were here, my hunch is Pastor Nick would tell you that he got the rock rolling experience. His very first baptism as an ordained clergy was to do an immersion baptism. For United Methodist clergy, that's a little unusual. So those are all rock rolling experiences. They're cool.
Well, and the thing that keeps standing out to me in the examples that you give and the examples Doug was talking about on Sunday is that we are part of the rock rolling business.
Right.
So like when we go back to the empty tomb, it was this divine intervention of like, we don't know how the rock was rolled away.
Yeah.
It was not possible for man to do it. They made sure of it, that it would take, so many people to roll it into place, and you're not getting it out of place. And so, the fact that we're now being brought into this, because every example that you give is about us serving other people.
Yeah.
And so is the idea that God is using us to do the rock rolling, or that God is the one doing the rock rolling?
Well, I believe it's God doing the rock rolling, but we are facilitators of God's work, right? In fact, this is a whole nother topic, but I can't talk about rock rolling without getting there. But so when Jesus comes and says, hey, I've brought the kingdom with me, that I'm bringing a whole new understanding of what it means to encounter God and to live for God, and it's building this kingdom because God's bringing this kingdom. That's what we're doing. God can't build that kingdom without us, and we can't do it without God, so it's a two-way street. And so, Doug spent a lot of time focusing on service, and I've certainly expressed that in many ways, but baptism is not about service so much as it is about a faith claim, right? And anytime I've encountered folks, for instance, another opportunity is people sharing their recovery story. That's not really about service, though one could argue that if I'm in a recovery group that we're serving one another. But anytime somebody shares their recovery story for whatever they're needing recovery from, man, that's a rock rolling deal as well. I just think it's a both and.
Yeah. Well, and I had a similar experience of, the story sharing piece over the weekend. Coming up in our May series, where we've already started talking a lot about Which Way Is Up. Meet the Pastors was focused on it last night.
Yeah.
And as part of that series, we are interviewing people who have experienced depression, anxiety, isolation. And we did a lot of those interviews over the weekend. And I had 2 people come back to me as panelists. And the reason that we're doing that is try to connect out with other people and make other people feel like they're not alone. But what I experienced is the rock rolling was happening over the weekend right here.
Yeah.
And I had 2 people come back to me and say, one person who struggles with depression, who was on our panel and talking about it, sent me a message and said, when I was driving home, that was the first time I felt pure joy in a long time after being able to share a piece of my story.
There you go.
And I was like, man, we're all preparing for this May series, but the transformation has already happened. If we just made a difference for that one person, then that was the purpose.
There you go.
And so it's really cool to see how things unfold. And I would hope that is moving into a rock rolling experience for him, but also for the other people who are going to be able to connect in with his story.
Yeah. We got a personal thank you note from a fellow member who experienced the Meet the Pastor last night, where we were talking about Which Way Is Up. And they were overjoyed because they too have experienced depression and anxiety, and they are already sort of experiencing a rock rolling encounter because of what's coming. So you're absolutely right. It's already starting. That's good stuff.
So we spent a lot more time on that question than I expected. Apparently, we're both really excited about the rock rolling business that
Praise
God
Praise God.
is in. So I'm going to jump and I'm going to ask you, what news do you rush out to share?
Yeah.
And of course, we're talking about from a spiritual perspective of, Mary Magdalene was like, I'm out of here. I'm sharing this news. But what are some other things that you rush out to share with joy to other people?
Yeah, well, so I'm going to preface this a little bit with, and this, unfortunately the church doesn't always get it right? Unfortunately, sometimes the church is messed up, and sometimes the church has not done well. And I don't mean Treach so much as just the Big C Church, Christianity.
But we're not excluded from that.
Well, no, we are a part of the Big C Church, right? Yeah. So when we get it right, I love sharing that. And to me, that's a part of the rock rolling business as well. So I think when we do things like Which Way Is Up, Which Is Coming, or when we help serve and create for a second time this mobile clinic in Mozambique, where we get to bring wholeness and help and hope to folks in a country that doesn't necessarily have a lot of that, man, I want to share that. I want to share the success of why it is we believe that's important. And in part, we believe that's important because of what we believe in Jesus. We believe that Jesus comes to bring healing and wholeness and hope. And we're going to be able to offer that, right? And so I love sharing that. I love sharing the story we just shared about baptism because it's just such a powerful sign and symbol of our faith. So I want to share that. When we were able to do the human trafficking and set literal people free from bondage and slavery, man, that's worth sharing, right? And all of that is what I just referred to generally speaking, and I happen to believe Jesus made this point as well, that that's a form of saving as well. You know, saving clearly is spiritual, but it's also physical and mental and emotional, and there are instances in Scripture that identify that. When the woman is healed and Jesus says, "Your faith has made you well," that word "well" that we get in the English, in the Greek, in the original language, it means to be saved. And so when we see stories in the Scriptures that identify being made well, particularly when faith is the criteria, like for that woman, man, that's being saved. And I want to share that news. And I think that news is much broader than somebody simply saying, not that this is a simple statement, but somebody simply saying, "I want to follow Jesus." That's cool, and I want to celebrate that. But it's also what that means 2 years from now and 10 years from now for their life and for their encounter. And I think that's where they're able to help save somebody else as well.
So when I was thinking about this question, I started first thinking about it from less of a spiritual perspective. I'm like, what are the things I like to share on social media? And
that might be pretty good, extensive. Yeah.
And so I was thinking about, like, what are the things that I'm so excited to share? And it always centers around new life or new experiences. I posted over the weekend, my roses are blooming, which I'm really
that was pretty cool.
about.
Yeah.
But also I see like new baby announcements. We just got a new puppy. Look how cute it is.
Yeah.
Or my kid just did this for the first time. My kid knows how to tie her shoes now. Like these new experiences that we get so excited about that we rush and we take the pictures and we rush out to share it. I don't treat my faith the same way as I do those things. And I would not describe myself as rushing out to share the news of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'm self-reflecting to discover why I am not as quick to do that. But I mean, that's something that I'm grappling with. And I'm hoping as we go into over the next 2 weeks, in the last 2 weeks of April, where I don't want to gloss over that we're talking about this Go Natural series in which we're talking about, okay, how can I better share the good news of Jesus in a way that complements who I am so that I'm honoring God, but bringing a piece of myself in. And so I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks because it's something I'm really bad at. I don't often talk about my faith and share my experiences. Maybe I do, but not in the way that's stereotypical.
Well, so I think, so we'll give them a brief teaser that Wednesday we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And I think, well, we'll give them a teaser. We won't go further into that.
Psych. All right. Well, that's about all the time that we have today because we went a little longer on those questions. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today for another episode of Go Beyond. And as always, you can catch our previous episodes at tmumc.org/gobeyond. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments. We go through and we read them, and we'll reach out to you and try to answer any questions that you have. So appreciate you doing that.
Can I put in a cheap plug for that Meet the Pastors for yesterday? People can still see that, right?
Yeah.
So where would they see that? Because that's a good setup for which
So
which
if you go to tmumc.org, it is on the homepage of our website. So it is the first video that you'll see on our website. And this was a great conversation where our pastors opened up about their experiences with depression, anxiety, burnout, loneliness, worry, all setting us up for this Which Way Is Up series that we've got coming up in May, in which we're talking about how we can better step into mental wellness. So man, kudos to the pastors for really opening up about their experiences last night. And I encourage you to go check it out.
Indeed.
Yep.
Have a great week, y'all.
All right. Bye, everybody.